And we are back. It's NBA Finals week. It's finally here. The season winding down. I have already decamped in Oklahoma City for the week, here 4 days early before the start of the NBA Finals. I've already had one meal at Mahogany. I plan to have another meal at Mahogany tomorrow and another meal at Mahogany. After that, I'm going to eat so much steak this week, I'm going to be nauseous by the end of this week. Fred Katz, former Oklahoma City resident, former Thunder beat writer, spent many a year out here in Oklahoma City, now covering the NBA at large and the New York Knicks specifically during these playoffs. What's happening, Fred?
Oh, I'm ready to join you in Oklahoma City in a day. I'm ready to go hit up all the old stomping grounds. I'm excited.
Fred, I was saying this to some Thunder staffers this week. I'm going to be here for 5 consecutive days. I've got to dip out after game 1 on Friday for a couple of days. But for 5 days, do you think I can eat at Mahogany every single day?
I think you'd be making a mistake eating at Mahogany every day.
Oh, do tell.
I think there are better spots than Mahogany. I think Mahogany is the known spot. It's the convenient spot. It's around the arena. It's where, at least when I was covering the team, it's the place that would stay open late so the players could go there late night after games and they could go there and they could get a good meal. There are other places that are just as good, if not better, than Mahogany in Oklahoma City. And I think you could diversify your palate a little bit.
The convenience,
enjoy the experience a little more.
The convenience, Fred, it is convenient. I'm staying at one of the
let's
fine
be real.
Bricktown hotels.
Let's be real, Chris. It is Oklahoma City. The beauty and the curse of Oklahoma City is that it does not matter how far away something is. Something could be 3 minutes away and something could be 2 hours away. It's never more than 15 minutes away.
Oh,
That's the beauty
true.
of Oklahoma City. Once you get in that car, it hits 15 minutes and time stops and you're there in 15 minutes. It doesn't matter. So you're good.
You are
good. You're always within 15 minutes.
You are a true Oklahoman. I've heard that phrase from a few members of the Thunder organization over the years that I've been coming here. I don't know. I may diversify maybe when the series comes back to Oklahoma City, if it comes back to Oklahoma City. I think, but for now, though, I'm going to try every piece of steak in the Mahogany menu. I might just go for it, Fred. I went with a 6 ounce.
Crazy at Cattleman's.
All
Cattleman's
right.
is killer. You want a good steak? Go to Cattleman's. The ranch is awesome. It's very high end, but it's absolutely amazing. Cattleman's is a great experience. It's very Oklahoma.
I might hit you up when you get to town to see if you can entertain on that count. All right, you're gonna be out here in a day or so. We're gonna have plenty of time to get to the finals, but you spent all of this postseason covering the New York Knicks, who just got beat in the conference finals, out in 6 games, losing in Game 6 to the Indiana Pacers. By success standards, it's a pretty good season for New York. 51 wins, most since 2013. First conference finals since 2000, so they cleared some benchmarks in New York. That being said, there are certainly some questions about this team going into the offseason. You and your colleague, James Edwards, wrote a terrific piece over at The Athletic, kind of chronicling some of the bigger decisions the New York Knicks have to make this offseason, some of the questions that the team may have had internally about Karl-Anthony Towns, his fit, how he was playing with that group. So let's just start here. As Leon Rose kind of unpacks the season and starts to do an autopsy on it, what do you think the biggest question that Leon and the front office is asking itself right now?
I think knowing them, the way they work in a very methodical kind of way. They're very measured. And I know this is the front office. They traded 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and they turned around, they made a Towns trade. To me, the defining characteristic of their front office is their patience, that they wait things out, that they wanted OG Anunoby for years and years and years. And they were like, you know what, let's wait until a time where we can trade for OG Anunoby without actually having to give up any draft picks at all. They are a very prodding, methodical, and logical front office. And I think what they tend to do is they tend to plan 900 different things of, okay, how can we upgrade on this? And then they go into another thing. Okay, how can we upgrade on this? Then they go into another flaw they have. Okay, how can we upgrade on rim protection? How can we upgrade on getting 5 shooters on the floor? How can we upgrade on bench depth? And they go through the whole thing. And then they kind of read and react in the moment based on all of these sorts of plans that they have come up with. So I think right now their process that they're going through is they're coming up with like, okay, how can we upgrade on the millions of different of things that we're trying to upgrade on, that any organization will be trying to upgrade on? And then they're going to kind of read and react depending on what becomes available over the summer. I think it's too early to know exactly what those moves are going to be in any sort of specific sense. I do think they realize it's a roster that requires upgrades, even though it made the conference finals. In my opinion, it was a very successful season for them. First conference finals in 25 years, I think, is a great accomplishment and should not be overlooked. And but I think the ultimate goal is to win 2 more rounds than they did. And in order to get there, I think they got to kind of figure that stuff out.
So I agree with you on the need for upgrades. The question is, what do those upgrades look like in the broader sense? They look like nibbling around the fringes where you get an upgrade at the perimeter. They've got a whole bunch of guys on the bench that are or can be free agents this summer. Or are we talking more about upgrading the team by dealing away one of the members of the starting lineup, one of the key pieces of the rotation? What do you think is probably the most likely way that this plays out?
If I had to say the most likely, I would say upgrades on the fringes. Maybe try to use like a taxpayer mid-level exception to bring somebody else in, add a little bit more depth. Maybe re-sign one of your free agents to something that's intentionally a little bit above deal with the intention of trading that guy, similarly to what they did with Precious Achiuwa last summer, even though they didn't end up actually trading Achiuwa. I do think one thing that is different about this roster than it was at least during the regular season is I think the way Mitchell Robinson played during the playoffs has turned heads inside that organization. And by the way, I think it would be crazy if it didn't turn heads. The guy was unbelievable the entire playoff run. And it wasn't, the thing with Mitchell Robinson for so long was just, can he stay healthy? It was, he's a good player. He's a game changer, but can he stay healthy? And what he did during the playoff run was surprising, at least to me. I won't speak for other people, but surprising at least to me, because it wasn't that he returned to the form that he was in before. He was a better player during this playoff run than he has ever been in his entire life against the most elite competition he could possibly be facing. Mitchell Robinson was always a good defender. He was always a great rebounder. When he got hurt, him and Steven Adams were the 2 best offensive rebounders in the league. But he never had these defensive instincts. I mean, he was a very good defender, but you could make a good argument Mitchell Robinson was the best defensive player in all of the playoffs this year. You could make a real argument of that. That's a whole other level. We're talking first team all defense level kind of guy, not just a very good defensive anchor. And I think people with the Knicks saw that and were like, this guy has evolved. His defensive instincts have evolved. He spent the last 2 years studying the game, and oh my goodness, the defensive smarts, the team defense, his ability to cover literally 5 guys at once on some possessions is extraordinary. I think there are some people who are like, you know what, maybe we should invest a little bit in Mitch and not just think of him as expiring salary going into next year. So I do wonder how that goes. To me, the ultimate question they are going to have to answer is, do you want to move forward with Karl-Anthony Towns being primarily your 5? Or do you want to move forward with Karl-Anthony Towns being primarily your 4? And you can mix and match depending on the situation. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But they played the whole season basically with Towns at the 5. By the end of it, they had put Mitchell Robinson in the starting lineup with Towns at the 4. And defensively, they look a lot better when they have a really good defensive rim protector out there. So that's something they're going to have to answer for the long term. I don't know exactly what their answer is going to be. And their answer might be, we make no changes because Mitchell Robinson is just going to start because he's that good and they have faith in him. And that's reasonable too. But I think roster building wise, that's kind of the most important thing they have to answer this year.
Yeah, I think they can almost look at Mitchell Robinson as being their free agent acquisition this summer, because he only played a handful of games in the regular season. When he got into the playoffs, as good as he was, I think there's another level that he can go to. I mean, when his conditioning gets back to being the level that it needs to be to play 30 minutes per game, he's going to be a vastly improved player. I mean, you could see in the conference finals, like when he hit that 7 minute of consecutive minutes mark, he just hit a wall and he started playing a lot worse. He started playing sloppier, and the Knicks weren't getting what they got out of him in the first half of that those minutes. And we've seen Towns just recently as last year, like he thrives opposite a defensive-minded big. Minnesota had a great defense with Towns and Mitchell Robinson. I think to me, the Knicks would be foolish, and I don't think they would do this, but the Knicks would be foolish to blow up that pairing, or at least to move off Mitchell Robinson without seeing it in full, without getting a full 82 games-ish or whatever it turns out to be out of it. You're right. Mitchell Robinson, like before he came back, you probably looked at that contract and said, that's the way they can improve. You take the $13 million expiring contract, you flip it for somebody else, something that you could use a little bit more. Now, you're not going to, to me, you're not going to get a better player for that value than what Mitchell Robinson can potentially bring to that team. But you talked about Towns, and you and James Edwards wrote about this a lot. And his defensive deficiencies are glaring, and they've always been glaring. He is one of the best offensive big men in the game, one of the best shooting big men that we've ever seen. When he gets it going offensively, like we saw in Game 3 against Indiana, he is unstoppable on that end of the floor. He's a beast. That being said, he blows up a lot of plays defensively. What did you learn about Towns over the reporting of this story over the last couple of weeks that maybe is concerning for the Knicks moving forward?
Well, I thought the great juxtaposition of Karl-Anthony Towns, like the full Karl-Anthony Towns experience, happened in Games 2 and Game 3 of the Indiana series, where Game 2 of the Indiana series, Towns was botching a lot of pick and roll coverages. And what happens is he ends up just sagging back on the screen too often. It's his comfort zone for whatever reason. He just ends up sagging back, and it looks like he's running a drop, which is when you sag back into the paint, and it looks like that is what he is supposed to be doing. And people think that the Knicks are in a drop on those plays. But if you watch the guy guarding the front end of the screen, you watch the guy guarding the ball handler, you can see that guy's not in a drop. And what happens is you've got one guy at the top of the pick and roll running one pick and roll coverage. And you've got another guy at the bottom end of the pick and roll running a different pick and roll coverage. And I don't care how well you run one pick and roll coverage and how well you run the other one. When they're two different coverages run by two teammates in the same action, they're going to go terribly, because the whole point is you're supposed to be running the same thing, not just willy-nilly doing whatever. And I know that was a thing that was a huge harping point for the Knicks all season, that Towns was kind of deviating and running the wrong coverages throughout the year. And I know it was something that kind of frustrated guys who were on the front ends of those pick and rolls, because they were just like confused. And the Knicks talked all season about how their communication needed to be better, how those moments needed to be better. And what they were talking about was they need some sort of same pagedness with Towns on these pick and rolls. I wrote about it in that story, and it blew up, and I felt bad about how it was aggregated, because I felt like Towns kind of ended up getting put on a poster when it was something that I wrote about all year as like a very X's and O's-y type of thing. Like I saw some place like aggregated it with like Karl-Anthony Towns doesn't grasp the importance of defense. And I was like, that's not what I wrote. I didn't write he doesn't grasp the importance of defense. It was this specific type of pick and roll communication. And yeah, I mean, look, that's something that goes back to Minnesota, where like it's just a struggle for Towns. I think it's part of the Towns experience. So in the Game 2 of the Indiana series, Towns ends up getting benched, basically for that exact reason. He's not properly executing the pick and roll coverages the Knicks are supposed to be running in Game 2 against Indiana, and Indiana keeps running these actions at him, and they keep succeeding in these actions. They go up 2-0 in the series. And then Game 3, Towns really struggles for the first three quarters, and he just does not look like himself. And he comes out in Game 4, and oh my goodness, is it every single reason that Karl-Anthony Towns was the number one pick, why every single reason why you trade for him, every single reason why Karl-Anthony Towns is a perennial all-star. It's just all on full display. It was my goodness. I mean, he had 20 points in the fourth quarter. That undersold it, right? Like he had 15 points in 4 minutes. It was unbelievable. And to me, so much of what Towns is his ability to lock in and focus on detail. There are a lot of times, I think, where he is focused with the ball. There aren't as many times where he is focused on all the minutia. Maybe he drives to the lane for a layup, but he's the last guy back on defense, or kind of that stuff we talked about with pick and roll defense. But you look at that stretch in the fourth quarter of game 3 when he's going off for 20. It's not just that he's going off for 20. He hit his third consecutive bucket in the fourth quarter, and TJ McConnell ran a pick and roll at him, and he had so terribly botched the pick and roll against TJ McConnell during game 2, where like he hedged the TJ McConnell pick and roll 30 feet from the basket for some reason in game 2, and it gave up a Miles Turner wide open dunk, and it was like, oh my goodness, why did that happen? And after he scores like his third consecutive bucket in the fourth, he covers a TJ McConnell pick and roll. He covers it perfectly. McConnell goes into him. He ends up contesting a TJ McConnell 6-foot shot. I think it's the first mid-range shot of TJ McConnell's career he actually missed. Towns gets the rebound. It was a perfect contest. It was really good positional defense. It was smart. Like, Karl-Anthony Towns is smart. He's a smart, like, you know him. He's a smart dude. Mm-hmm. He's a smart dude. He cares. His care level is high. He's a very, like, you can say things to him. Like, there's some guys in the league who it's like, oh, you can't tell him when he's messing up because he's gonna go off or something like that. Like, that's not the case with Karl-Anthony Towns. For him, it's a focus thing. It is a just zeroing in and focus thing. And sometimes I think his mind just gets away from it for whatever reason, the same way all of our minds get away from things. I can relate to it. I have the worst ADHD of all time, and I drift off sometimes. I can completely relate. And when he is focused and locked in like that, it's like, that's why you have that man. And I think that is the Karl-Anthony Towns experience, those 2 games.
I thought the inside the NBA guys had a great interaction with him after, game 5, where they're sitting with them and they just come right out and say, why do you commit so many bad fouls? Like, why do you take yourself out of games with these bad fouls? It's one thing to like be contesting a shot at the rim. There's a collision, that kind of stuff happens. But like, why are you 2-hand shoving Pascal Siakam when he's going to the basket? Why are you grabbing on to the arm of a player while he's trying to step out and set a screen? Like, those are just some of the mind-numbing plays that he's made. He also has a habit of the fake hustle. Sometimes I've noticed the old I like to call it the old Vin Baker, which I saw from Vin a lot back in the day, where it's like, all right, you're under a pick and roll, and like Halliburton had a shot. I think it was the end of this last game where, you know, Towns just kind of stood there and was about to watch, but then Halliburton kind of set his feet, and then Towns did one of those like charges at him towards the end that had no impact whatsoever on the Halliburton shot, but it kind of looked good on TV. He's prone to those types of actions. All that being said, I do think that his positives outweigh his negatives, and I think they outweigh his negatives by a significant amount. I just think he's so dynamic offensively and so capable of carrying you through stretches offensively that he would be someone I would be very reluctant to punt on unless I was getting back an equally dynamic 2-way player back in return. I think he's that good. And look, we don't need to unpack this too much, but all these stories about like the Knicks, can they get Kevin Durant? No, they can't. They can't get these guys, right? I mean, they don't have the assets. Like, they made their deals. They traded away pieces to get OG Anunoby. They traded away draft picks to get Mikal Bridges. Sure, they can be in the mix for certain guys, but the marquee guys, the franchise guys, you're just not getting in New York right now. Unless you find a team like, say, Milwaukee really wants Towns and they want to do a deal that gets them back a frontline player in return. But if there's any team out there that you're dealing with that wants draft capital back in return, the Knicks are going to get outbid. There's just too many teams out there with better pieces that they can offer. I want to ask you about Jalen Brunson and the postseason that he had. I saw in the immediate aftermath of the loss, a lot of people regurgitating the old Becky Hammond clip of like, you can't win with a small guard. And look, the facts are that, you know, outside of Steph Curry, you can probably count on a couple of fingers where the lead player on your championship team is a guard the size of Jalen Brunson. All that being said, he helped take out Detroit by cooking Oscar Thompson, who is an elite defensive player. He beat back the myriad of Celtic defenders, some of the best wing defenders in the league playing in Boston. And then even with, you know, Aaron Nesmith in his shirt for, you know, the better part of 6 games, still averaged 30, 31, shot 50% from the floor. So Do you think this postseason showed that the Knicks can, theoretically win at the highest of levels with Jalen Brunson as their frontline guy?
Yes, I think that's a dated narrative, to be honest. And let's be real. Let's turn it over. What does that narrative mean? That narrative means you can't win when you have a small guard as your best player, because that guy can get picked on either side of the floor, right? And what is height if not a tool, right? So there are guys who are 6'4" who use their height well. Or I should say there are guys who are 6'2" who use their height well, and there are guys who are 6'5" who don't use their height at all. I get that Tyrese Halliburton is 6'5", and Jalen Brunson is listed at 6'2".
Yeah, he may not be. I'm 6'3", Fred. You're a tall guy too. You've stood next to him. I question the official listing. I question it.
In terms of utility, is there a difference between Jalen Brunson and Tyrese Halliburton? Like, Tyrese Halliburton gets hunted on defense the same way that Jalen Brunson gets hunted on defense. Like, yeah, he's longer and he's taller. I don't really see, in terms of utility, in terms of narrative, and in terms of like actual height, yeah, there's a difference. But in terms of utility, like having the reason that you can't win with a small point guard supposedly is because that guy is going to get attacked on defense and all these other reasons. Like, it's the same thing to me. The Knicks could have won this series. The Knicks didn't lose game one. They didn't blow a 14-point lead in 2 minutes and 51 seconds because Jalen Brunson is 6'1" or 6'2" or 6'3" or 6 feet or whatever he is. They lost that game because Jalen Brunson was turning it over like crazy and because of other reasons. And he wasn't turning it over because he was small. Yes, I think it's doable. To me, I think the greater question the Knicks are going to have to answer is how can they insulate their defense at all times with Brunson and with Towns on the court as often as those guys are. Because what we saw during this series, to me, the ultimate difference in the series, and maybe I'm making my point against myself, but the ultimate difference in the series was the Pacers went out of their way to attack Towns and attack Brunson. The Knicks went less out of their way to attack Tyrese Halliburton, who was the worst defender on the floor often for Indiana. And you look at how often Brunson was getting put in pick and rolls. You look at how often Towns was getting put in pick and rolls. I didn't think it was a coincidence that game 5, the Knicks end up winning that game. Brunson looks better. Knicks defense looks better, and the Knicks win that game a lot. Pacers got away from putting Brunson into pick and roll actions during that game for whatever reason. I don't really know the reason. And if I had to guess, my guess would be, Tyrese Halliburton kind of just had a lull that game. And my guess was kind of just like, it's 3-1. We're just going to go out there and play our game and we're going to go home. And the Knicks, with their backs against the walls, were a little bit more locked in. The Pacers kind of got away from the, not the formula, but just the relentlessness of that formula and how the relentlessness that formula requires, and they weren't doing it on every possession. You look at the numbers, and through the first 4 games, the Pacers were putting Jalen Brunson in about 31 pick and rolls a game. Game 5, they put Jalen Brunson in 18 pick and rolls. It was like they nearly halved it. They come back in game 6, they start putting Brunson and Towns in more pick and rolls again. They corrected the problem. That is something to look out for. When it's Brunson and Towns, that is obviously a huge weakness for the Knicks. Once you get late into the playoffs, the big question is always, how many exploitable weaknesses do you have? And often it's not the more talented team that wins the series. It is the less flawed team that wins the series, because especially when you got two good coaches, you got a really good coach in Tom Thibodeau, you got a really good coach from Rick Carlisle. Those two coaches are going to be picking and clawing at the other team's flaws however they possibly can. And Carlisle saw Towns out there defensively, and he saw Brunson out there defensively, and he was like, let's go at those deficiencies as constantly as we possibly can. And when you have those two guys out there at the same time, I think that's when you run into problems, and that gets into the greater roster building issue without question of just like, can you win with both of those guys? But if we're talking about Brunson in a vacuum, like, yes, Jalen Brunson, I have no qualm saying, yes, Jalen Brunson is good enough. Jalen Brunson is big time of a player enough. If Jalen Brunson were averaging 18 points a game and leading an offense the way that he did, then that would be one thing. But I mean, he got very ball heavy with very ISO heavy at times during this postseason run. I don't think that's who he is. He's had stretches throughout his career, even as recently as last year, where he's been like a really dynamic off the ball player. I could see him taking kind of that sort of stuff to heart over the offseason, adding more of that going into next year. A couple of years ago, he was one of the most dynamic, guys running around screens in the entire league. It's in his game, it's in his bag, and it's in his mind, it's in his intelligence. He's a highly intelligent player, and he's very introspective. I have no doubt that Jalen Brunson is good enough. We'll see if he does it, because it's really hard to win a title, but he's that level of player, I think.
Let me give you my hot take for the show, besides, Mahogany's rules. Jalen Brunson is the best pound-for-pound offensive player that I've seen since Allen Iverson. If you take away the athleticism part of it that Iverson possesses, Jalen Brunson might be the best pound-for-pound player that I've ever seen. He is 6'0". He doesn't play anywhere near the rim, and yet he is able to make elite defensive players look confused. Not just bad, but confused. Great defensive players like Oscar Thompson, Derek White. Nesmith had a great series against him, but he had his moments where Brunson might be backing him down or going to the rim, and Nesmith isn't sure what to do. And all these defenders, they get in front of Brunson, and they're not sure what he's going to do, so they're not sure what they are going to do. I have seen very few players have that effect on defenders, and I've seen no players the size of Brunson and without the athleticism that Brunson doesn't possess. I have not seen guys do that. When you have a player like that who is capable of doing that, there's no doubt in my mind he can be the one that can offensively lead you to a championship. I think some of the things that you just discussed there, the isolation stuff, that can be cleaned up. I think a lot of that's coaching. I think Tom Thibodeau has some responsibility there to not just put Jalen Brunson alone on an island and tell him to go to work no matter how great an offensive player that he is. But he's still very much in the prime of his career, and I, like you, have no qualms whatsoever building an offense around that guy, building a team around that guy. He would be absolutely untouchable to me if I'm the New York Knicks. And you want to add to that, or go ahead?
No, he is definitely untouchable. I'll tell you that. I was joking around with somebody recently that, like, let's say Milwaukee called and was like, hey, it doesn't work cap wise, but let's say the rules of the cap just didn't exist anymore. And Milwaukee called and was like, how about Giannis for Jalen Brunson? And like, objectively, like, as Jalen Brunson, we think the same thing of Jalen Brunson. He's awesome. He's great. But like, Giannis is a 2-time MVP. He's Giannis. Like, objectively, like, obviously you want Giannis. I don't even know if the Knicks engage in the call. Like, I think the Knicks might just be like, nope, sorry, no way. This guy's not going anywhere. Like, I think he might be one of the few guys that you can't even call about. Maybe I'm wrong with an example that's extreme, and obviously we'll never know if I'm right or wrong because that example is never going to present itself. But like, yeah, like when you say untouchable, I get the vibes of him with that organization, the way that he's the captain, the way that everybody turns to him when anything goes wrong, the way that he's kind of looked at as like the guy who built everything up, the way he committed, the way that he took way less money in an extension than he could have gotten if he waited till free agency, purely so he could help them with second apron stuff. Like, I just can't imagine any trade in which they would be even say hello when they picked up the phone on. I can't even think of it. And I think there are very few players in the league who fit that description.
Yeah.
And it always goes beyond basketball when it does. Yeah,
no question. And he's a great leader on that team. He's built to play and succeed in New York, which not all guys are. I think you build around Brunson, you figure everything else out. And look, the reality of today's NBA is that continuity is an asset. Continuity is an attribute that championship teams have. You look at the teams that have won titles. You take the Golden State win out of the way. Milwaukee banged on the door for a number of years. Denver banged on the door for a number of years. Boston, I think they lost 4 conference finals before they won an NBA championship. Winning a title is hard. It takes a lot of years to form the type of team to win a championship. But I remember, Fred, talking to executives from other teams about Giannis and gauging their interest in Giannis. And one of the things that they were saying to me was like, yeah, he's a great player. We'd love to get our hands on him, but like, you acquire a guy that gobbles up 35% of your salary cap, and all of a sudden you've got to shake up your roster altogether. Like, it's hard to piece together a championship team that isn't together for a number of years. You can't just stitch a team together overnight. Like, Phoenix is proof of that. Like, other teams are proof of that. You just can't do it. So I think maintaining this group, it may not work. There's no guarantees on anything in this league, but I think that's the best chance of the Knicks to win a championship, which brings me to the final point of Tom Thibodeau. I was a little surprised, Fred, to see the number of, and again, it's social media, who cares, but like a number of people on Twitter and other social platforms, calling for Tibbs' job, thinking that somebody might be better. Like, my first reaction to all that was like, okay, now you got to name who. Like, you got to bring in Michael Malone, who is like Tibbs light, who got let go in Denver because he wasn't playing.
Tibbs light.
I mean, he wasn't playing young guys. Like, he got let go in Denver because he wasn't playing guys. Like, that's the same criticism of Tom Thibodeau. I love James Borrego.
I think it's just Tibbs. I think it's just Tibbs in a Michael Malone mask.
Yeah, maybe a little bit younger.
Tibbs, right?
I don't know.
They're so similar. You know who Tibbs is? You know who Tibbs' coaching mentor was? Brendan Malone.
Yeah, Brendan Malone.
Like,
yeah.
They are so similar. They are so. And by the way, this is not a knock on Michael Malone. Wonderful coach. They're both really good coaches.
Michael Malone will get another job, deserves another job. But if he gets the Knicks job, it's just like replacing A with B. Like, you're just swapping out identical coaches. And we still don't know what Michael Malone's going to coach like with, no Nikola Jokic to kind of lean on there. And the other guys out there, like Frank Vogel, James Borrego, like, is that a guaranteed upgrade? I mean, Phoenix is pretty much evidence that, hey, just swapping out coaches is not going to make a big difference. The Lakers tried that as well. So I think you and I would agree that Tom's job is safe going into next year. But what does he need to kind of improve on? Like, what has got to be his next step to help this team take another step?
Yeah, the way we had it in the story is that, like, Tibbs has full buy-in from Jalen Brunson. There's absolutely no doubt and no daylight in there. Like, full buy-in.
By the way, Fred, he had a great, like, Brunson's answer to the guy. I don't know who it was. I wasn't there.
It was Popper. It was
Popper. Oh, Popper look at Popper was nervous asking that question. He kind of stumbled through it a little bit. And I get it. Like, you got to ask when a coach has been in as battle as that. But that was, that reinforced the point you made in your story. Like, that there was no room for interpretation with how Jalen Brunson answered that question.
Yes, for sure. I felt bad for Popper because I think Jalen, who is very good with the media, I think Jalen probably and knows Steve very well, so I think felt comfortable reacting the way that he did, which I think is something that people don't necessarily see on the outside, where it's like Steve is there every single day and has known Jalen for years and years and years. Like, Jalen feels comfortable reacting in that way as opposed to maybe with someone he didn't know. I think Steve thought, because Steve knows that we all know that Jalen is the Tibbs guy. The Tibbs supporter, like the enthusiastic, loves Tibbs sort of guy. And so I think Steve had seen the public sentiment of, like, do you get rid of Tibbs? And was like, let me tee up Jalen because he'll probably want to squash this, because Jalen is, a 20-something-year-old who's online and has a podcast and a Twitter account, and he'll probably want to squash this. So I think Steve thought he was doing that. And the timing, Jalen, I think, didn't appreciate immediately after a loss. But I think Jalen thought he was, like, searching for a quote or something like that after a loss. But I think Steve was like, this is the last time I'm going to get to ask you this question until next year when it's no longer worth asking. So I'm going to tee you up for it now. But yes, Jalen, full support of Tibbs, always has been. One of the reasons he signed with the Knicks was because he wanted to play for Tibbs. He was raised to play for Tibbs. I mean, his father played for Tibbs in the 90s. Jalen literally Can I tell you about the time that Jalen met Tibbs? You know the time Jalen met Tibbs? I can't tell you about the time Jalen met Tibbs because Jalen was literally too young to retain memories. That's how young Jalen was. I have asked him, "Oh, tell me about the time you met Tibbs." He was like, "Oh, I don't remember it." I'm like, "You don't remember it, or you like were like emotionally and mentally incapable of remembering because you were too young?" And he's like, "The latter." His youngest memory is after he had met Tibbs. That's long he's known Tibbs. His dad was an assistant on every Tibbs staff. He was raised to play for Tibbs. I'll tell you what, the Brunson family motto, you know the Brunson family motto? The Brunson family motto is the magic is in the work. That is the Brunson family motto. You know where they got that motto from? Tibbs used to say that to Rick when Tibbs was an assistant with the Knicks and Rick Brunson was a player on the Knicks. And then Rick brought it home. And so the Brunson family wears sweatshirts and T-shirts that they get made up that says the magic is in the work. But that's a Tibbs expression. The magic is in the work. Like Jalen Brunson was raised to play for Tibbs. So it would be confounding if he didn't want to play for Tibbs. Like this is the coach that he has spent his whole life preparing to play for. And he genuinely loves playing for Tibbs because they have the exact same approach to work, to preparation, to competition. They're very similar. They might be different personality types, but they have very similar values. All of their values overlap in terms of competitiveness, in terms of will to win, in terms of dedication to the job, all that kind of stuff. And Leon Rose still has Tibbs's backing as well. Or I should say Tibbs still has Leon Rose's backing as well. I don't want to say with 100% like, oh, he's safe for sure, because James Dolan, you don't know. And I don't know what Dolan's going to do. And obviously he's the final decision maker and he could wake up and decide that something's not good enough or whatever. But in terms of the front office, in terms of, the top of the locker room, Tibbs has support from there. I can tell you that. And I agree with you. I think continuity is really important. And there's no question he has his flaws as a coach, as basically every coach does. I also think they didn't make the playoffs and then they made it to the second round. And then they made it to the second round and took Indiana 7 games in the second round in an injury-riddled series where maybe they would have won it had they not had a lot of injuries. And then they made the conference finals. It's like, that's positive progression. The conference finals is a great accomplishment. That's a really great accomplishment. And it's not like it's some rogue conference finals run for a fluky team. It's a team with a bunch of guys in their prime. It made a run and made some moves to win now, made some moves to win for the future, has the ability to keep the roster together. All their top 7 guys are under contract for next year. They're not going to be a second apron team next year. They have the ability to sustain something moving forward. The roster is not out on Tibbs. Just with the way that Tibbs is, there are certain guys who are going to be more pro Tibbs than there are who aren't pro Tibbs. But I don't think you could possibly look at the way that they just came back from down 900 times during the playoffs and be like, man, this team doesn't play hard for Tibbs. Like, they play hard, they play rugged, they're mentally tough. Like they have an identity. I don't see how it would be responsible to make some sort of change after the consistent success and the positive steps they've made every single year under that guy in an organization that we've seen can devolve into real chaos if you allow it to. The steadiness that he and Brunson and Leon Rose in that front office has brought that organization has been something that was very rare in that franchise. And I would not just let it go willy-nilly if I were them.
And you don't want to fuck up next season. Like, next season, there's a window here. The Celtics are done as conference contenders for at least 1 year. I don't know who the favorite is to win the Eastern Conference next year, but a Knicks team that looks largely like the team that finished this season, I think would be in the mix for the number 1 overall seed. That's not nothing. I don't know if anybody's winning a championship outside of Oklahoma City. We're going to learn a lot in the next couple of weeks about Oklahoma City's staying power. They might be the one team to beat these new cap rules and, become kind of a new mini dynasty. But as far as the Eastern Conference goes, these Knicks proved that they can beat teams like Detroit, that they can certainly compete with, and if they hadn't blown game 1, might beat a team like Indiana. Cleveland, what are they going to look like next year? Milwaukee, are they going to tear it down? There's a window here. Maybe it's just a one-season window, but there's a window for a team, any team, to get out and win a first round or win the Eastern Conference. I think the Knicks would be foolish to blow that opportunity on any kind of risk. Fred, great stuff with the story. You and James Edwards. I encourage everybody to go over to the New York Times, to The Athletic, and read that piece. And I will see you out here, Fred, in Oklahoma, maybe at Mahogany's, maybe at Cattleman's. But I will tell you this, every morning I am going to get my Dunkin' Donuts because that's how I roll, Fred. That's how I roll.
There you go. Good move. We'll get you out of Mahogany. We'll find you a new spot.
Appreciate your time, Fred.
Thanks for having me.